We're going to find the slope of a line, but we don't have the equation this time. Instead, we're just going to have 2 points. You know, this is an ordered pair, and this is the second ordered pair. And we could actually go and graph these, and it becomes a lot easier to see it when you graph it. However, this is not the intent of the lesson. Here's -2, -5, so here's the first point right here, and 1, 1. Here's the second point. Let's go ahead and there we have the line. Now, if you want, you can always graph it, but sometimes you get one that is the points are so far from each other it becomes very difficult to make use of that. And if we wanted to find the slope of this line, we could say, well, we've got to go from this bottom slope up to the top slope, and so it goes from -5 on the y-axis all the way up to +1. Well, that's a change of 6. We went up by 6. And then we're going from -2 on the x-axis all the way over to +1 on the x-axis, and that's a change of 3. This is our rise, and this is our run. And we're used to looking at slope as rise over run. So it would be the same as 6 over 3, and 6 over 3 is the same as 2. We could simplify that down to 2, because 6 divided by 3 is 2. So our slope is 2. Now, if we wanted to do this without using the graph, one way that we could do that is to use this equation, m equals, or slope equals, y minus y over x minus x. And if you notice, I didn't read those little subscript numbers on there. I'll explain what those are in just a second, but it's really not even that important. I would encourage you to just get in the habit of using this, y minus y over x minus x. And if you have 2 points, then you could do this. Well, my first y was -5, and my second y was 1. So let's just plug that in. -5 minus 1. And then my x's, here's an x, so -2 goes on right here. Get the minus sign in there, and here's an x right here, so let's just minus 1. Well, -5 minus 1 is -6. Don't worry, it'll work out okay. And -2 minus 1 is -3. And -6 divided by -3 is 2. Now, why does subtracting our y's and subtracting our x's work? Well, let's take a look at it like this. Here is -5. Here is -5 on the y-axis, and here is +1 on the y-axis. 1 minus -5 is 6, or -5 minus 1 is -6. Either way, you're going to get this verdict of a 6 there. The absolute value of it would be a 6. The same thing's happening with our x values. We were down here at -2 on the x-axis, and if we went over to 1, that's a difference of 3. And notice that's a difference of 3, or like a movement of 3. We can just subtract our x values. -2 minus 1 would be -3. And if we flipped around the other way, we could say 1 minus -2 is +3. And it works out okay in the end, as long as when we start to plug numbers in, we pay careful attention which one we started with. We started with -5 for our y, so that means when we come in to plug in our x's, make sure you start with that point. So whatever y you start with, make sure that you use its buddy, its x, to start the x's with, and it will always be okay. Let's go down and look at a much more complicated problem, one that you wouldn't be able to graph, and this time we're not even going to try to graph it. A line runs through these 2 points. Let's remember our basic equation is slope equals y minus y over x minus x. And if you still remember the old saying of rise over run, well, that means your y's are on top because that's your up-down movement. And your run is on the x-axis. That's your left-right movement, and that's the reason we have our x's on the bottom and our y's on the top. So let's go through and finish this up. -26 is my first y, so I'm going to put -26 there. That handles the first y. I need to put a minus sign in because that's in the equation. And now I need my second y value. My second y value is 70. Go ahead and put it in your fraction bar. Let's go ahead and clean this up so we can see it a little better. I need to plug in my x. I can't put in positive 3 because I didn't start with 70 for my y. See, I started with a negative 26 for my first y. So since I started with negative 26, I need to start with its x value of that ordered pair. And so I put in negative 3 there. So that is the x. Let's put in our minus sign. And now let's put in the other x value, which is, in this case, positive 3. You should be able to get negative 96 over negative 6 with no problem. We also know that anytime we get two negative signs on there for a fraction or a ratio, it just makes it positive. And 96 divided by 6 is 16. So m is 16. The slope of this line is 16. That means you would go up 16, right? And then we would go to the right 1 because we know how to make it into a fraction if need be. We would just put a 1 under it. So that's the slope movement of this line. It's very, very steep. And that's all it does. That's all that you have to do to find it. A couple of points of interest though. First off, the fractions are okay for a slope. So let's take a look at this. If you got negative 7 over 3, that's fine. I can't simplify that. If we got 2/3, that's fine. I can't simplify that. I'm not going to make it into a mixed number. We don't want to do that. We'll just leave it as an improper fraction if we have to. But if I had something like 10/20ths, well, you know, that's okay to start with, but we can definitely simplify that on down. So fractions are okay. Just make sure that you simplify them. Improper fractions are okay, but don't ever make them into a mixed number. So remember those few facts. And then here's the last thing I wanted to point out to you. Sometimes you will have a 0 in the slope. When you go to figure it up, you know, your y minus y, it might be 0 on top. And you might have a different number on bottom, like let's just say negative 3. Well, 0 divided by negative 3 is 0. That's the same thing as a horizontal line. Okay? Because there's no up or down movement. There's no rise movement. It's just, well, you keep moving 3 to the left or 3 to the right. So if you ever get 0 for the slope, it's a horizontal line. And then we have to look at the other possibility. What if we had like, let's just say 6 over 0, where the 0 is on the bottom? Well, 6 divided by 0, it will get you an error message. But we're not going to call it an error message. We're going to say it's an undefined slope. But when your calculator gives you that error message, when you're trying to go, well, 6 divided by 0, and it gives you a syntax error, you say it's undefined. That basically just means it's vertical. Or you can save yourself the difficulty and just know that anytime that you've got 0 on the bottom of your slope, it's just vertical, undefined. So when we get this, though, anytime that 0 is on the top, we can go ahead and say it's that. There is the occasional 0 over 0, but you really shouldn't be getting that in these types of problems because in order to have that happen, you're using the same point twice, and so you really shouldn't have that, but it'd still be a 0 slope. That should do it. Hopefully, this gives you a little bit of guidance about how to handle these problems when you're given 2 points of how to find the slope.